Kemi Badenoch saying she has sacked Robert Jenrick from the shadow cabinet, removed the whip and suspended his party membership with immediate effect. Writing on X saying, "I was presented with clear, irrefutable evidence he was plotting in secret to defect in a way designed to be as damaging as possible to the shadow cabinet colleagues and the wider Conservative Party." Let's bring in our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. Sam, what on earth is going on?
This is massive in terms of Conservative politics. Kemi Badenoch has just axed and suspended possibly the biggest threat to her in her shadow cabinet. She has removed the whip and sacked from her shadow cabinet Robert Jenrick, who ever since he lost the leadership contest to her just over a year ago, has widely thought in Westminster to have been plotting against the Tory leader. Here we are, about 16 months on from that leadership contest, and Kemi Badenoch has actually increased in strength and is strong enough now to face down and axe that principal rival inside the shadow cabinet. She says she has been presented with irrefutable proof that Robert Jenrick was about to defect to Reform UK. Important to say we haven't had a response from Robert Jenrick. We have not seen the evidence. However, Kemi Badenoch absolutely clear and barrelling in to that argument. There were the slightest rumours knocking around that allies of Robert Jenrick were playing footsie with Reform UK, so that this is a surprise but not a complete out-and-out shock. He was always somebody who seemed more open at some point to doing a deal with Reform, but Kemi Badenoch dramatically pulling the rug from under him and announcing via social media out of the blue that Robert Jenrick is out of her top team, out of the Conservative Party, and has had the whip suspended from him. This shows a number of things. First of all, it shows that the Conservative leadership are very aware of the clear and present danger of Reform, but are willing to take action rather than encouraging any sense of the two parties growing closer together. What they are doing is making clear that there is to be no crossover between Reform UK and the Conservative Party. Second, it is an out-and-out show of strength by the Conservative leader. Kemi Badenoch acting decisively, with the element of surprise, the first mover. She's not waiting to see whether these rumours, this evidence turns out to be true. She's getting on the front foot and getting rid of Robert Jenrick. And thirdly, she is making absolutely clear she's the boss. Now, viewers of Sky News will have followed the story of how Reform after the election surged ahead in the polls, but have dropped back a little bit in recent times while the Conservatives languished on third place. But they are now in a slightly stronger position. While that was going on, Robert Jenrick was effectively playing footsie with Reform. Viewers of Sky News will remember before the summer, back in April, we revealed a secret recording of Robert Jenrick saying that if closer to the next election, the two parties, the Tories and Reform UK, hadn't worked it out and there wasn't a clear Conservative advantage, there was no point in the two parties battling it out and using their firepower against each other at the expense of fighting Labour. A clear sign back in April, therefore, that viewers of Sky News will have seen of Robert Jenrick's intent. Viewers here will also have seen in September and October at Conservative Party conference when I approached Robert Jenrick about this. Again, he just left it more open than you might expect for some kind of deal in the future. Didn't shut that down in the way that Kemi Badenoch does to that question. You have Kemi Badenoch being very, very clear about what's going on. I'm going to read you a little bit of what she's been saying. She said that she's removed the Conservative whip from Robert Jenrick after dismissing him from the shadow cabinet. She says she was very sorry to be presented with clear, irrefutable evidence, not just that he was preparing to defect, but he was planning to do so in the most high-profile, damaging way possible to the Conservative Party. I'll just stop there. We have seen figures like Nadhim Zahawi grab the microphone alongside Nigel Farage just earlier this week. If Robert Jenrick had done that, that would have been sensational. It is my responsibility, Kemi Badenoch says, to protect our party. And faced with that information, and we haven't yet seen that information, I took the only decision that any responsible leader could, because the British public are tired of psychodrama. They saw too much of it in the last government. I think there was too much of it in this government. I will not repeat those mistakes. She goes on, Kemi writes and says, when I was elected leader, I committed to doing politics differently. Disloyalty and dishonesty undermines trust in politics. They're also disrespectful to our party members, our councillors, MPs and most of all our voters. You all deserve better. She goes on to give some context, some background. The Conservatives suffered a heavy defeat in 2024. That was painful, but we are rebuilding with strong principles, clear plans and with a serious team united around a shared purpose. When individuals choose to walk away from that effort for personal ambition, I see nothing about the Conservative Party and everything you need to know about them. There will be more to say, and I know there'll be a lot of commentary about this decision, but I want you to all be in no doubt when global uncertainty is where it is. I'm focused on holding the government to account, ensuring they are acting in the national interest and the Conservative Party can deliver. That's the statement that Kemi Badenoch has just given. A sensational moment as she axes perhaps her chief rival in the shadow cabinet, the loser to the leadership contest back in the back half of 2024 for, she claims, planning to defect to Reform UK, delivered with the utmost of burn that Kemi Badenoch is capable of making sure she has no time for the disloyalty of the man you see on your screens, and she is ousting him, yanking him out of the shadow cabinet. Important to say, we have not heard from Robert Jenrick. Important to say, we have not yet seen the evidence that they are talking about and that Kemi Badenoch is talking about today. Nigel Farage, interestingly, you've had one of them, is doing 2 press conferences today. Could it be as soon as this afternoon that this was being planned for? Nigel Farage has just reacted. Nigel Farage has said on social media in the last few moments, I'm very surprised that this news has broken. I will never reveal private conversations with anyone. I'm going to say that I've had conversations with a number of very senior Conservatives over the course of the last week, the last month. Nigel Farage, therefore, not confirming that he has had talks with Robert Jenrick, not denied that he's had talks with Robert Jenrick, but clearly the Conservative Party leader says she was presented with incontrovertible evidence that Robert Jenrick, one of the leading figures in her shadow cabinet, the Shadow Justice Secretary, somebody who was thought to be privately plotting with certain donors to try and seize the crown if she ends up falling, she essentially has moved to oust Robert Jenrick from her shadow cabinet, suspend him from the Conservative Party, burn his reputation to the best of her ability to make sure that he has, in her view and in her attempt, as little credibility if he now does decide to defect to Reform UK. And frankly, politically, he may not have that much option, and to try and seize control of a situation before it spins out of her grasp. In some ways, this could be a defining moment for Kemi Badenoch's running of the Conservative Party. By acting in this way, acting with this tone, acting with this severity, and getting rid of somebody who had looked like he was circling her with an eye on the crown. It does seem to be as if this whole affair centres on whether or not there was contact between Robert Jenrick and Reform UK and who was having conversations with whom, suggesting that maybe Robert Jenrick was having dinner with Nigel Farage as recently as last month. Maybe even suggestions that Team Jenrick left stuff lying around that made it that got back to Kemi's office. That's currently being reported by one Express journalist. So I think there is a lot to find out in terms of the evidence that Kemi Badenoch has used and has based her action on. And I think that is one of the key things. So we turn now in a moment to hear from Nigel Farage. He's been giving his full reaction. He was doing that in the first of 2 press conferences, a press conference up in Scotland today, where essentially he denies hearing anything, but in a moment we will get a full readout from Nigel Farage about his perspective. And then secondly, the biggie we need to hear from Robert Jenrick. What did he do? What does he accept? What evidence does he agree with? What evidence does he dispute? And politically, what does he do now? Is he just going to pick up sticks and move all the way over to Reform, a party whose agenda and personnel he always seemed to have more sympathy with than Kemi Badenoch as leader of the Labour Party? Was he really planning to effectively destroy a party that nearly elected him leader but didn't quite? Will this be cast as brave, a brave move smelling the wind, the direction of travel of politics at the moment? Or will this be seen as sour grapes from somebody who did not seize the crown, was been unable to seize the crown, and is now confronted with a stronger Kemi Badenoch than before? Dramatic moment that could change the way Kemi Badenoch is seen.
Sam, we've just been hearing from Reform leader Nigel Farage, who's been speaking in Scotland. He was asked about Robert Jenrick. Let's take a listen.
I'm very surprised that this news is broken.
Are you, though?
Well, I never reveal private conversations with anybody, which is why, you know, when people like Malcolm came to me to talk and he was a front bencher, nothing ever leaked. So I'm going to say that I've had conversations with a number of very senior Conservatives over the course of the last week, over the course of the last month, and a lot of them realise that for all the talk that Kemi's doing better at PMQs, which is true, for all the talk of a supposed Kemi bounce, I think a lot of them realise that on May the 7th, or should I say May the 8th, the Conservative Party will cease to be a national party. They will all be obliterated in Scotland, in Wales, in the Red Wall councils, if they're not all cancelled. We'll find out later on today about that. So there's a lot of people seriously considering their future. As far as Mr. Jenrick's concerned, of course I've talked to Robert Jenrick. Was I on the verge of signing a document with him? No. But have we had conversations? Yes.
So...
Let's take you back to Sam Coates, who's in Westminster for us. We are going to turn back to that press conference because Beth Rigby is there and will be asking Nigel Farage further questions. So when that happens, we will go to Beth. But Sam, just in the interim, what do you make of those initial comments there from Nigel?
Nigel Farage has confirmed having conversations with Robert Jenrick, the leader of Reform UK, making clear he has been meeting Robert Jenrick. On one level, they've mixed in the same circles for a number of years. The question, really, that we don't know the answer to is when did that contact take place? Nigel Farage suggests that he wasn't on the verge of signing up to Reform, that Robert Jenrick wasn't on the verge of signing up to Reform. But really, it all depends on what the contents of the evidence that Kemi Badenoch says, irrefutable evidence. She said she was presented with clear, irrefutable evidence. Not just that he was planning to defect, but he was planning to do so in the most damaging way possible. What is this evidence? What are the possible papers that have been left lying around, potentially passed to Kemi Badenoch's office? Does Robert Jenrick agree with this analysis of what he was about to do? Does he dispute it? Does he go ahead and defect to Reform? Or does he insist that he's a true Conservative fighting for the future of the party that he has been an MP for since 2010? Those are big, big questions. This is about one man who was a pretender to the throne, who didn't become elected Conservative Party leader in the back end of 2024 and is now out of front-rank politics for the Conservative Party. But it is also about something much bigger on the right of British politics. Two parties with different visions for what the right of politics should look like, battling it out, battling with each other, and it's not clear, here we are in the second year of a parliament, which one is going to win out. Not actually as far away from one another in the polls as they have been. The Tories on about 20, according to this week's YouGov. Reform on 24-25, one of the narrowest leads for Reform over the Tories for some time, putting Kemi Badenoch in that slightly stronger position. Nigel Farage making the case, though, in that press conference that really this conversation is all about what happens in those May local and national elections, Scotland, Wales, London boroughs, other council elections. Will there be a further reform surge that he
Sam, let me interrupt you there and take you live to Beth Rigby.
Mr Farage, just to follow up on the issue of Robert Jenrick, Badenoch has just sacked him from her shadow cabinet, removed the whip and suspended his party membership with immediate effect. And she said, I was presented with clear, irrefutable evidence that he was plotting in secret to defect in a way designed to be as damaging as possible to his shadow cabinet colleagues and the wider Conservative Party. Mr Farage, can I ask you, were you planning to unveil him as a new star sign-in to reform this afternoon in London, because you were due in London later today? And is he welcome to join reform now if the Tories don't want him?
Well, it sounds to me like she's panicked. Because, as you know, I am doing a press conference in London this afternoon at about 4:30. Obviously, we had the Nadeem Zahawi defection just the other day. We had the offered defection a few weeks before that. There's been quite a long list of former Conservative MPs that have been joining us. There have been others that have tried to join that we've said, no, we don't think it'll work. So she's aware that there is that move. And so I suspect she's panicked. I suspect she's added up 2 and 2 and made 5. I can confirm, hand on heart, honestly, look you in the eye, I was not going to be unveiling Robert Jenrick at 4:30 this afternoon. As I said to your BBC colleague a moment ago, is he one of many that I've talked to about what the future might look like? Absolutely. But, well, have I signed a deal with him? No.
OK, you're in talks, but Mr Farage, may I ask you, I mean, he's just been suspended from the Conservative Party for plotting to defect. I assume he's plotting to defect to reform.
Well, it could be the Lib Dems, I don't know, you know.
Do you think he's a Lib Dem?
No.
Can you confirm you've been in talks with him?
No, I confirmed that already a couple of times.
Would you welcome
I have been talking to lots of people. Do you know what? We will welcome anyone that comes to us from whatever party who is going to add to what we do. It doesn't just see us as perhaps a life raft to save a parliamentary career, but people who want to add to what we have to do, who share our values, who share our beliefs, but equally, you have to be honest about the sheer level of failures of 14 years of broken manifesto commitments. So do you know what? I'll give him a ring this afternoon.
I mean...
I'll give him a ring this afternoon.
He ran for leadership.
I might even buy him a pint, you never know.
He's in the shadow cabinet. He was in the shadow cabinet.
Yes.
He'd be a big sign-in for you, wouldn't he?
I mean, he was part of that Tory failure, but the one big tick against his name is that he did resign as immigration minister because of the failures of the government. So that would be a big tick in his direction. I will speak to him this afternoon and see what he wants to do.
OK, thank you. Lord Offord, I did have a question for you. Sorry, events have rather...
He just signed his resignation. Call him Malcolm.
Lord Offord, I wanted to ask you about a key voter priority here in Scotland, which is the NHS.
Yep.
You've previously said there needs to be a dialogue with the public about the acceptability of user charges for some services. And
We will leave the questioning there for the moment. That was Beth Rigby speaking to Nigel Farage. And Sam, that key line there from Nigel Farage, I can confirm hand on heart I was not going to unveil Robert Jenrick at 4:30 this afternoon at the second press conference that's scheduled for Reform UK. But then going on to say later in the exchange, I will give him a ring this afternoon, I might buy him a pint, and I'll give him a ring and see what he wants to do. What do you make of that?
Well, Nigel Farage is making absolutely clear there is contact between him and Robert Jenrick. One of the reasons we understand that Kemi Badenoch sacked him earlier today from the shadow cabinet and suspended the whip. So, in a sense, we now have two sources, Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage, confirming contact between Robert Jenrick and Nigel Farage, something that Kemi Badenoch sees as unacceptable and not something that members of her shadow cabinet could do and should do. Quite understandable. I think most party leaders would feel the same if a member of their top team was talking to a rival party leader. We've got a bit more detail about what's going on, which is courtesy of Jack Elson from The Sun. Apparently, the Tory chief whip, Rebecca Harris, rang Mr Jenrick this morning to inform him of his sacking. He's said to have protested his innocence. Right, that's the first time that we've had any suggestion that Robert Jenrick is going to deny or has denied some of these allegations. And he protested his innocence before putting the phone down. Senior Tory sources say that Team Jenrick left some incriminating evidence he was poised to defect lying around that made its way to Kemi Badenoch. They also point to a dinner that Mr Jenrick had with Nigel Farage last month. So we've got a bit of timing now, as well as people close to him making overtures to reform. So it's recent contact between Robert Jenrick and Nigel Farage, contact which is confirmed by Nigel Farage, who says he'll talk to Robert Jenrick later this afternoon. One of the reasons, plus apparently this incriminating evidence left by Team Jenrick lying around that made its way to the Conservative leader. In the last few moments, Robert Jenrick kicked out of the Tory WhatsApp group 3 minutes after Kemi Badenoch made her tweet. So fast-moving developments in Tory circles. Right, what of the man Robert Jenrick? Robert Jenrick is now, he was once a One Nation Conservative, but now on the right of British politics and attacked the last leadership contest from a more right-wing policy platform. Unsuccessful, but has been much more open to conversations with reform and conversations about what the two different parties might look like if they worked together, cooperated more in the run-up to the next election, much more so than Kemi Badenoch has been open to conversations about how to cope with reform. Clearly ambitious. Clearly has a close group of mates, close group of friends, even inside the shadow cabinet. Big moment for figures like Rick Holden and other friends of Robert Jenrick, who you often see on Robert Jenrick's feed going to football matches, the darts and the like. So, breaking news, by the way, from courtesy of The Times, is we've just heard from Steve Swinford. It sounds like Kemi Badenoch's team got hold of Robert Jenrick's resignation speech after it was left lying around. It was a near final text, reports The Times. He cancelled the speaking engagement this week and was thinking and they thought that this was due to the fact he was about to announce his defection. So it sounds like, even though Nigel Farage says he wasn't going to sign up Robert Jenrick his second press conference this afternoon, the indications are that the Conservative headquarters believed that we were on the cusp of this big move, that there was a resignation speech pretty much prepared, ready to go, that Robert Jenrick was starting to prepare the final stages of that defection. He has, appears, protested his innocence in some of the conversations, but we wait to see how this unfolds.
And with all of that in mind, let's just hear from Kemi Badenoch, who posted a video alongside that tweet on X. Let's take a watch.
This morning, I removed the Conservative whip from Robert Jenrick after dismissing him from the shadow cabinet. I was very sorry to be presented with clear, irrefutable evidence, not just that he was preparing to defect, but he was planning to do so in the most damaging way possible to the Conservative Party and his shadow cabinet colleagues. It is my responsibility to protect our party, and faced with that information, I took the only decision that any responsible leader could. Because the British public are tired of political psychodrama. So am I. They saw too much of it in the last government, they're seeing too much of it in this government. I will not repeat those mistakes. When I was elected leader, I committed to doing politics differently. Disloyalty and dishonesty undermine trust in politics. They're also disrespectful to our party members, our councillors, MPs, and most of all, voters. You all deserve better. Conservatives suffered a heavy defeat in 2024. That was painful, but we are rebuilding, with strong principles, clear plans, and with a serious team united around a shared purpose. When individuals choose to walk away from that effort for personal ambition, that tells you nothing about the Conservative Party and everything you need to know about them. There will be more to say, and I know a lot of commentary about this decision. but I want you all to be in no doubt. It's a time of global uncertainty. I am focused on holding the government to account, ensuring they are acting in the national interest, and that Conservatives deliver a proper plan for a stronger economy, stronger borders, and a strong...
Let's take you back live to Fife and Nigel Farage.
Is the door open to Robert Jenrick if he wants to...
Well, as I've said already, I'm going to give him a ring this afternoon. I might buy him a drink and see what he wants to do. As I say, he did resign from the last government on a point of principle, on immigration, and frankly, the Boris wave was one of the biggest breaches of electoral trust we've ever seen in this country, given the 80-seat majority that he got in 2019, which I played some part, actually, in helping him achieve, and to promise lower numbers and to deliver record numbers, in many cases of people whose indefinite leave to remain comes up in the next 2 years and who will prove to be a huge financial burden on taxpayers for decades to come. The fact that Jenrick resigned over that was the right thing to do. So wait and see. And a question for the leader formerly known as Lord Offord. That's very good.
You've been... sure. You've been handpicked for... Yeah. OK. So the mic's been taken away from Lord Offord. But before it is taken away, you were handpicked to be a Lord at the House...
Let's just leave that questioning there. Questions now being put to Lord Offord instead. So let's bring in Sam Coates again.
That's what I'm looking for.
And Sam, what do we make of Kemi Badenoch in this situation? What does this tell us about her leadership of the Tory party, her increasing maybe power within that leadership role, and the strength that she's maybe derived also from this move?
Well, it's a big moment for her. It will be a leadership-defining moment for her as she takes on and sacks Robert Jenrick from her front bench, perhaps akin to the moment where Keir Starmer took on and got rid of Jeremy Corbyn from the Parliamentary Labour Party. I think that's the closest comparison I can think of. That was a moment that defined how Keir Starmer wanted to be seen. So too could this be a moment that sends a very clear signal about Kemi Badenoch's attitude to Reform UK. Look, for much of the Premiership, post her election in, I think, November 2024, Kemi Badenoch's the first year or so saw her more or less underwater as Conservative Party leader, way behind in the polls and struggling a little bit to find her voice. But this shows she has now got a grip.
Different set.
Let's take you back for a second to Fife. Sorry, Sam, we'll be back with you in a second.
That net zero, mass migration, North Sea taxes and many other things were a terrible mistake. They have to make real mea culpas. And anyway, I'll cheer you all up next week because I'll have a Labour defection next week, and that'll change the script, won't it? Go on. Do
reforms, immigration crackdowns hurt Scotland?
Is that for me?
Well, it may as well be.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
You answer it.
Well, I think what we're seeing in Scotland is that this is now the three issues that are of most importance in local communities, obviously the health service, the economy and immigration. And, of course, the particular policies put in place around Glasgow City Council and put through the SNP have exacerbated that. That's now why it's a real issue that previously was not really an issue in Scotland for many, many years. We have a very proud tradition of welcoming strangers to Scotland and integrating in Scotland. But in the last 5 years, there's been a big change in that approach, which is why it's now on the radar in this election.
Yeah, I mean, outside the European Union, we are now free. We are free as a country to say that we should, as much as is possible, and without sacrificing quality, put the interests of British workers ahead that of workers of other nationalities. And I can't understand why that's controversial. But apparently, in some elements of the press, in criticisms of other parties, me saying that is controversial. I think putting the interests of British workers first is the right thing to do. I think it will be supported by a vast majority of voters here in Scotland and across the wider country. OK, Alan Jenkins, 5 News.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Away from the circus of defections, how relatable do you think your Scottish leader, who's a multi-millionaire, is to ordinary Scots?
You dreadful man, you've been successful. How awful.
What a crime.
Why don't we get more failures like Rachel Reeves running the country? I mean, here we are with our economy tanking nationally, tanking in Scotland, tanking in Wales, being led by people who couldn't run a blooming whelk stall. And surely what we want are people who have been successful. It's not, look, Malcolm is not somebody born with vast levels of privilege or anything like that. He's done what he's done because he's got a good brain, he's worked damned hard, and you know what? Rather than being looked down upon, I'd like young Scots to say, do you know what? If he can do it, I can blooming well do it. And these are some of the attitudinal changes that are needed right across the United Kingdom. And there are elements of America we can like, elements of America we perhaps don't like. But one thing about...
We'll keep a watching brief on the reaction from Reform UK in Scotland. Also just hearing from the Liberal Democrats, a party source saying the Conservative shadow cabinet makes the traitors' round table look united. The country, the Lib Dems say, deserves better than a clapped-out Labour government and the same old Conservative chaos. Sam Coates, is this Conservative chaos or is this a shrewd move by Kemi Badenoch?
Well, I think there's a battle to try and define the narrative of what's going on. Fast-paced events this morning. Less than an hour ago, Kemi Badenoch announced that she'd sacked Robert Jenrick from her shadow cabinet and suspended the whip. So let's look at the different sides and how they're trying to cast it. Zia Youssef from Reform UK, senior figure there, he says Kemi begins the brutal purge of those most likely to challenge her in May post the electoral wipeout. James Cleverly, keep your phone on, last days of Rome. So Reform UK trying to make this look like desperation, in Nigel Farage's words, panic. That's how they are casting the actions of Kemi Badenoch, Tory leader, this morning. I think that Kemi Badenoch has thought about the tone that she has adopted, come barreling out with an online video, tweets and supportive information. So what they have done is try to get ahead of what they thought would be a devastating defection and make sure that they seized the agenda and stopped it from happening in the way that Nigel Farage would have wanted. And in doing so, took out one of Kemi Badenoch's biggest thorns in her side. The conference just in September in Manchester saw lots of people, including Sky, follow around Robert Jenrick, see whether he was disloyal, see what his tone and approach was to reform while still being in that Tory shadow cabinet. The question is, what are the ramifications? What are the ripple effects? What do Robert Jenrick's friends in the Conservative Party, including those in the shadow cabinet, now do? So there are a huge number of questions that will flow from this important moment. Really, there's a huge sort of existential question for what does the right of the British politics look like? What kind of conservatism, with a small c, would prevail in Britain at the time of the next election, after the next election? Is it that harder-edged, more populist Reform UK approach, which has been doing very well in the polls up until about a month ago, slightly starting to tail off in the last few weeks? Or is Britain's most successful political party, the Conservative Party, the dominant party on the right for over a century of British politics, going to make a comeback, or do the two different political forces have to come to an accommodation? That kind of big picture theoretical debate today, all crashing into the form of one man, Robert Jenrick, still for now a Conservative Party member, but suspended from the Conservative whip in Parliament, sacked from the shadow cabinet. There you can see him giving a speech just weeks ago as Shadow Justice Secretary. He is Shadow Justice Secretary no more. Kemi Badenoch coming out saying she had got clear, irrefutable evidence that he was preparing to defect, and this is meant to be a folder containing effectively the potential resignation speech of Jenrick to defect to Reform UK. We can now confirm, Sky News can now confirm that the reason for the sacking was Kemi Badenoch found out that Robert Jenrick had been speaking to Reform UK's leader Nigel Farage. And we can now confirm that the Conservative Party leader's office was basically got hold of some quote-unquote stuff lying around that got back to Kemi's office. It appears that Team Jenrick left some papers, quite possibly this near resignation speech, and that made its way to Kemi Badenoch too. Those two pieces of evidence, the meeting, the papers, are basis of the sacking today. There is a report that Robert Jenrick protested his innocence. Will that hold up to scrutiny once the evidence is presented, if it is by the Conservative Party? What does he do now? Could he be a member of Reform UK by the end of the afternoon, given that Nigel Farage has promised to talk to him, to phone him, to meet him, potentially to have a drink with him maybe today? Is this whole thing going to be sped up? Was this an act of treachery by Robert Jenrick, or far-sighted political manoeuvre by somebody who can see the big structural shifts in British politics and see the way the wind is blowing? That's why this matters. They may be two parties on the right fighting over, not a comb, but Robert Jenrick, but what they are, it's key figures determining which side they're going to back as the more successful vehicle for the right of British politics.
Sam Coates, live in Westminster for us. Really appreciate you. Don't go anywhere, but I do want to bring in former Conservative Special Advisor Joe Tanner, who joins us now live on Sky News. Joe, your reaction to the development of the last half an hour or so?
Wow, it's just another element of the saga that continues, isn't it? It's very interesting and decisive action from Kemi Badenoch, which I think will have taken many people by surprise, but probably actually more so if the truth is that Robert Jenrick was planning to join Reform, then actually it's the first kind of time we've seen the wind taken out of their sails a little by someone getting ahead of their news.
And what happens next in this situation? What are you expecting to see? Are you expecting to see some announcement by Jenrick and Farage that he will join the party? It kind of seems maybe that's about the only place he can go at the moment.
Well, it's an interesting question because, firstly, this would be a significant sign that Robert Jenrick actually is perhaps his leadership ambitions have been dampened slightly, because Kemi being on the up and actually leaving the Conservative Party in this way, particularly if he is going to defect to Reform, then that means really he's got no chance of going back to be a future leader of the Conservative Party. But we also know that Nigel Farage is going nowhere, and there are also some other significant individuals within Reform that have probably got their eye on the job should Nigel ever decide to go anywhere. So I think the next step is really for Robert, who, as Sam Coates just said, apparently protested his innocence. Well, if there is a press conference later on today and he's unveiled, that will seem like he was not telling the truth, which is not a good look. I think the reality is it's been an open secret that Robert was seen talking to Nigel Farage. There's been reports of him talking in private members' clubs. There's been all sorts of rumours about his potential move. But Kemi has forced the issue. But the story at the moment is Kemi forcing the issue in that she's taken decisive action rather than Robert Jenrick being the one who's caught everyone off guard. So I think it will be interesting to see what his next move is. But Nigel and Robert are not declaring that there was a plan and that it was something they were going to do later today. So let's see what happens. If it looks pretty slick and planned this afternoon, we've got to assume that actually there was something underway.
And what do you make of Kemi Badenoch at the moment and her leadership? Because if we went back X many months, the talk would have been, is she going to be ousted from that role? Is Robert Jenrick going to take over as the leader of the Conservative Party? What do you make now of how she's performing on, well, the 15th of January 2026?
Well, I think we have to be careful here. She's ultimately doing the job that she was supposed to be doing, and everyone's got very excited because she's been doing better at doing that job, and I think that's a fair assessment. And I think, well done on her team and to her for actually stepping up and being more of an opposition than actually the opposition has been for a while. I think we also need to recognise that it doesn't take a lot to knock people off their stride or for events to take over and for things to change very quickly. You have to question whether Robert actually, if he has been planning to defect, perhaps the fact that Kemi was on the up has forced him to consider whether it was worth hanging around in the Tory party, because he didn't think there was going to be any room anytime soon for him to progress. So, that could be a direct result of Kemi performing better. But I think, this is a long road. Kemi's done a good job of getting where she's got the party to now. And she's now got to start, I suspect, thinking about this narrative more deeply about what is Reform. Is Reform a new party, or is it just a bunch of people that actually were not progressing within the Conservative Party anymore? The rumours about Nadeem Zahawi, supposedly begging for a peerage, and therefore he sort of almost went off in a huff to reform. I think that's going to be, now she's got to continue to steady her troops. I think a lot of people will say good on her for being decisive, and that will potentially give her maybe a bit of a further lift, rather than looking like the Tory party was stunned and shocked and didn't see it coming when suddenly Jenrick popped up next to Farage during a press conference, perhaps as early as later on today.
There is obviously a team Jenrick. He has his supporters. He has people both within the parliamentary Labour Party who will, Conservative Party, sorry, who are pro him and his stance on politics. There'll be people within the grassroots membership that will be pro Jenrick as well. Could he still potentially cause kind of the damage that Kemi Badenoch's trying to avoid by looking to take not just him, but more people with him to reform? Is that a possibility?
Well, I think what's really significant with the move of Jenrick and also with Danny Kruger is the sort of, I suppose, more serving Tories as opposed to those that had formerly had roles. And so, yes, Robert is very, very dynamic, is considered to be very popular. He does have a following, you're absolutely right. He also knows what's been going on in the Tory party, in the immediate period, the last few weeks, the last few days, the last few hours. So he has a sort of, I suppose, an interesting knowledge that is a working knowledge that could be incredibly useful around plans, around things that were going to be happening with the upcoming elections. That stuff could be incredibly useful to Farage and to reform more generally. But it's more about what he stands for and his appeal that I think is something that is a risk to the Tory party. He was the one that, as you remember, started the sort of walking, talking videos. He's a good communicator. But he is also going to be stuck for a while if he does come out for reform in this sort of limbo where you are talking about what you've just done and why you've just done what you've done, as opposed to talking about the issues moving forward. So I think there is potential for some upset. But I do think there is Kemi's improvement, Kemi's performance becoming that bit stronger does mean that perhaps some wavering Tories have a decision to make about whether they want to hang in there. And as Sam Coates was saying also, Reform's poll ratings have sort of plateaued a bit. And there is a sort of question over whether they were just in on a particular ride, whether they were riding a wave of particular public sentiment. Actually, when it gets closer to an election and more policies come out, are people going to make different choices than perhaps those boxes they may have ticked when a survey came round about their potential voting intentions? There's a difference between that and what you actually put when you put a cross in the box on a ballot paper. So time will tell, but it's definitely livened up Westminster. I can see the energy that Sam's showing, and I'm sure we'll see across the day.
Jo Tanner, former Conservative Special Advisor, good to have you with us. Well, on that note, let's cross back to the energetic Sam Coates. Sam, you've got your ear to the ground in Westminster at the moment. What are you hearing?
The question in Westminster right now: is Robert Jenrick a traitor, sour grapes, left the Conservative Party as his rival who got the crown is now stronger than at any point of her leadership, Kemi Badenoch sacking him because he was preparing to defect? Or is Robert Jenrick the person getting ahead of massive, massive shifts in our politics, changes to the way that politics is done, and the leading and acknowledging the decline of the leading force on the right of British politics, the Conservative Party, as it engages in a slow decline post the last election? Robert Jenrick is one of those two characters right now. In truth, he's probably a bit of both. In truth, he is probably about to appear in the next few hours on camera to explain what on earth has happened, because what has happened in the last hour is that Kemi Badenoch has sacked him from the front bench, has sacked him as Shadow Justice Secretary, has suspended him from the Conservative Party after getting hold of basically what looked to them like the sort of pretty final draft of his resignation speech from the Conservatives, suggesting that there'll be a defection to Reform UK within maybe days. Nigel Farage has appeared in the last half an hour, told our Beth Rigby that he was not preparing to unveil Robert Jenrick this afternoon, but has confirmed that he was talking to Robert Jenrick, the pair having conversations about the future of British politics. That in itself would probably be a firing offence for most party leaders if there were secret discussions between a member of their shadow cabinet or cabinet and a rival party leader. So that alone, that confirmation from Nigel Farage alone, probably enough to have cost Robert Jenrick his job. So there is now fast-moving development. We will find out whether Robert Jenrick is still protesting his innocence, as I think he did briefly to the Tory chief whip earlier today, or whether he has now embraced the claims that Kemi Badenoch has made, that Nigel Farage has partially supported, that he was heading out the exit door of the Conservative Party and is going to cross to Reform UK. We are waiting to see what he does, but really his future has been in part decided by Kemi Badenoch trying to display a show of strength by getting ahead of the story and announcing on social media from nowhere, out of the blue, that she had dealt with Robert Jenrick by getting with him after that irrefutable, clear evidence, as she puts it, and says that she took the only responsible decision and course that a leader of the Conservative Party could do by getting rid of him. So it is all unfolding at a rapid pace. Viewers of Sky News will remember all the way through 2025, Robert Jenrick was still, despite losing that leadership contest, a pretender to the crown, sort of seen by many inside Westminster as still wanting Kemi Badenoch's job, even though she beat him in the back end of 2024. But viewers of Sky News will also know that on multiple occasions, Robert Jenrick took a different line towards a future, a more cooperative future between Reform UK and the Tories, suggesting maybe, in a leaked recording that I got hold of just before the summer, that maybe if the two parties are still duking it out by the time of the next election, there'd have to be some kind of arrangement made between them to stop, basically, Reform fighting the Tories as happened in 2024 and Labour coming up through the middle. So Robert Jenrick's different line on Reform, privately telling friends, I believe, that idea of maybe a late Parliament pact or agreement or informal arrangement was a good idea, publicly not saying so, and all of that very much at odds with Kemi Badenoch's line and what she was saying publicly. But extraordinary twist with just the small details. The papers left lying around containing, by Team Jenrick, containing that resignation speech, or so it's being reported. I think all of that what has just happened in the last hour will shape what happens to the right of British politics over the next few months and years. We have a man, Robert Jenrick, clearly considering his future. Where does the future of the right in British politics lie? Was he about to defect, as Kemi Badenoch says? Is this as strong as some might cast Kemi Badenoch? Or, despite getting ahead of the facts, ultimately, is she just dealing with the fear of possibly the most high-profile betrayal to date, reflecting the fact there is a lack of confidence in her top team, that she would win a general election, she can defeat Labour, and that her Conservative Party would be stronger than Reform UK on taking on Labour? Is this a moment of strength for Kemi Badenoch? Or is this a moment where she just tries to turn what was about to be a catastrophic betrayal because people do not have trust in her into something of her own advantage? Those are the questions that will be argued over. Right now, Reform UK trying to make this look like weakness from Kemi Badenoch, sacking people that might challenge her after the May elections. Nigel Farage calling it panic, suggesting that the facts on the ground after the local elections, those Scottish and Welsh elections, will determine pretty much everything. Kemi Badenoch coming out of the blue with her social media video announcing she'd sacked him. Lots of briefing about the reasons behind it, out of the traps to try and control this story. Frankly, the right of British politics, the fact that developments are a little bit out of control. They're a little bit too fast-moving. Politicians will try and put their interpretation of events as they please. Tories likely to say Kemi Badenoch has been strong. Opponents likely to say that she is weak and presiding over a declining party. We will see how this shakes down. There now has to be a shadow cabinet reshuffle. Who will be the shadow justice secretary? We now have to track down Robert Jenrick. Does he defect? Does he challenge the allegations? We now have to assess Kemi Badenoch's strength, and where does this leave Labour? And could right now British politics, which is in an unprecedented five-party duking it out in the polls, where does this change, and how does this change the kaleidoscope of British politics?
Sam Coates there live in Westminster for us. Going to have plenty more from Sam and the team in Westminster throughout the course of the day. Plenty more as well on the Politics Hub live blog. The team on the digital desk there bringing together all our reporting, insight and analysis. Plenty more to come. Good afternoon. You're watching Sky News. It's 12 o'clock. The main breaking story this lunchtime. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has sacked Robert Jenrick as Shadow Justice Secretary. The Tory leader says she has irrefutable evidence that he was plotting in secret to defect in a way designed to be as damaging as possible to the party. Here's what she posted on X.
This morning, I removed the Conservative whip from Robert Jenrick after dismissing him from the Shadow Cabinet. I was very sorry to be presented with clear, irrefutable evidence, not just that he was preparing to defect, but he was planning to do so in the most damaging way possible to the Conservative Party and his Shadow Cabinet colleagues. It is my responsibility to protect our party, and faced with that information, I took the only decision that any responsible leader could. Because the British public are tired of political psychodrama. So am I. They saw too much of it in the last government. They're seeing too much of it in this government. I will not repeat those mistakes. When I was elected leader, I committed to doing politics differently. Disloyalty and dishonesty undermine trust in politics. They're also disrespectful to our party members, our councillors, MPs, and most of all, voters. You all deserve better. Conservatives suffered a heavy defeat in 2024. That was painful, but we are rebuilding, with strong principles, clear plans, and with a serious team united around a shared purpose. When individuals choose to walk away from that effort for personal ambition, that tells you nothing about the Conservative Party and everything you need to know about them. There will be more to say, and I know a lot of commentary about this decision. But I want you all to be in no doubt. It's a time of global uncertainty. I am focused on holding the government to account, ensuring they are acting in the national interest, and that Conservatives deliver a proper plan for a stronger economy, stronger borders, and a stronger Britain.
Well, in the last hour, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has been speaking at a news conference in Scotland. He told our political editor, Beth Rigby, that while Robert Jenrick wasn't about to join Reform, he would be speaking to him later about his future.
Mr Farage, just to follow up on the issue of Robert Jenrick, Badenoch has just sacked him from her shadow cabinet, removed the whip and suspended his party membership with immediate effect. And she said, I was presented with clear, irrefutable evidence that he was plotting in secret to defect in a way designed to be as damaging as possible to his shadow cabinet colleagues and the wider Conservative Party. Mr Farage, can I ask you, were you planning to unveil him as a new star sign-in to Reform this afternoon in London, because you were due in London later today? And is he welcome to join Reform now if the Tories don't want him?
Well, it sounds to me like she's panicked. Because, as you know, I am doing a press conference in London this afternoon at about 4:30. Obviously, we had the Nadeem Zahawi defection just the other day. We had the offered defection a few weeks before that. There's been quite a long list of former Conservative MPs that have been joining us. There have been others that have tried to join that we've said, no, we don't think it'll work. So she's aware that there is that move. And so I suspect she's panicked. I suspect she's added up 2 and 2 and made 5. I can confirm, hand on heart, honestly, look you in the eye, I was not going to be unveiling Robert Jenrick at 4:30 this afternoon. As I said to your BBC colleague a moment ago, is he one of many that I've talked to about what the future might look like? Absolutely. But, you know, well, have I signed a deal with him? No.
OK, you're in talks, but Mr Farage, may I ask you, I mean, he's just been suspended from the Conservative Party for plotting to defect. I assume he's plotting to defect to Reform.
Well, he could be the Lib Dems, I don't know, you know.
Do you think he's a Lib Dem?
No.
Can you confirm you've been in talks with him?
No, I confirmed that already a couple of times.
Would you welcome
I have been talking to lots of people. Do you know what? We will welcome anyone that comes to us from whatever party who is going to add to what we do. It doesn't just see us as perhaps a life raft to save a parliamentary career, but people who want to add to what we have to do, who share our values, who share our beliefs, but equally, you have to be honest about the sheer level of failures of 14 years of broken manifesto commitments. So do you know what? I'll give him a ring this afternoon.
I mean...
I'll give him a ring this afternoon.
He ran for leadership.
I might even buy him a pint, you never know.
He was in the shadow cabinet. He was in the shadow cabinet.
Yes.
He'd be a big signing for you, wouldn't he?
I mean, he was part of that Tory failure, but the one big tick against his name is that he did resign as immigration minister because of the failures of the government. So that would be a big tick in his direction. I will speak to him this afternoon and see what he wants to do.
OK, thank you. Lord Offord, I did have a question for you. Sorry, events have rather...
He just signed his resignation. Call him Malcolm.
Lord Offord, I wanted to ask you about a key voter priority here in Scotland, which is the NHS.
Yep.
You've previously said there needs to be a dialogue with the public about the acceptability of user charges for some services and the removal of free prescriptions for certain categories of medication. Do you still think that's right for Scotland? And Mr Farage, do you think the NHS should be funded through taxpayer money in England? Thank you very much.
So reform is very clear. There'll be no plans to be charging for the NHS in Scotland. That paper you're referring to was a paper written by a group of medics who were examining other systems around Europe, in particular looking at Sweden and Germany, who spend the same amount of money as Scotland does and get better outcomes. So it's a sensible thing to say, how do they get better outcomes and what are some of the differences?
Let's bring in our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, who joins us now. And Sam, about 45 minutes has passed since this news broke. Just bring us up to speed as to what's happened so far today.
This story has it all. Treachery, betrayal, ideology, plotting, cunning, idiocy, leaving papers lying around, bravery, desperation, and already, it seems, memes in the style of the traitors. That is the consequence of Robert Jenrick being sacked by the Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, from the shadow cabinet and suspended from the Conservative Parliamentary Party over allegations of plotting that he was to defect to Reform UK. Kemi Badenoch says that she was presented, in her words, with clear and irrefutable evidence that he was planning to defect in the most damaging way possible. So she has got ahead of that and today released a video and statement saying that he is now out of the shadow cabinet as Shadow Justice Secretary and out of the Conservative Parliamentary Party. Nigel Farage in the last hour has confirmed he was having conversations with Robert Jenrick. He's confirmed he will have further conversations with Robert Jenrick later today when he flies down from Scotland to London, possibly over a pint. Is Robert Jenrick now going to leave the Conservative Party and defect to Reform UK? How has this all come about? Well, it appears that Robert Jenrick and his team left his defection speech lying around. And that got passed up to Kemi Badenoch's office. And that, plus reports now confirmed by Nigel Farage, that Nigel Farage and Robert Jenrick were having discussions, were enough for him to, for her to decide that that was treachery of sufficient order to cast him out of the Conservative Party family. It's a defining move for her. Her allies will present it at a moment of strength, as a moment of seizing control of a story, and as a moment of decisiveness to send a signal where her values lie and what she will and won't put up with. But it is also potentially a reflection of the fact that a senior Conservative figure, a pretender to the crown, somebody who wanted to be Tory leader, does not appear to have sufficient faith in the current Tory leadership that he wants to stay in the party and thinks that the future of British conservatism, the future of the right in British politics is better served by Nigel Farage's Reform UK. So for all the talk of Kemi Badenoch being strong, is this actually, in the bigger picture, a judgment of somebody who is weak, fundamentally and structurally weak? Those are the things that are going to be debated after today. A sensational move that will have ripples for weeks and months to come. We are waiting to hear from the central protagonist in this drama as memes of Robert Jenrick trussed up in the chair of the traitors starts to flood through social media as I speak. We wait to hear whether the man on your screens is indeed going to defect. Now, all last year, we were picking up signs that Robert Jenrick took a different approach to Reform UK, a more accommodating approach to Reform UK. Doesn't want them fighting, Tories and Reform fighting at the next election in the event that the two are rivals, allowing Labour to get back into power for a second term. I got leaked audio in April suggesting that he thinks there should be some kind of pact ahead of the next election if the Tories aren't decisively in front. Listen to this that I think prefigures what we're seeing today.
You head towards a general election where the nightmare scenario is that Keir Starmer sailed in through the middle as a result of the two parties being disunited down. I don't know about you, but I'm not prepared for that to happen. I want right to be united. And so one way or another, I'm determined to do that and to bring this coalition together.
Robert Jenrick said there, I want the right to be united, but they are not. And today, Robert Jenrick is being forced to choose. And he, on the assumption that that Kemi Badenoch has made that he is going to go to Reform UK, is being forced to choose, and it's not going to be a one that will see him being able to continue at the top table of British politics inside the Conservative Party. We are seeing the man walking into the distance leave the stage of front-rank British Conservative Party politics, and now his future is unknown. We want to hear from him. We're waiting to hear from him. Robert Jenrick will be a pivotal figure in the debate between Reform UK and the Conservatives. What's he going to pick? Where's he going to jump? Was he just an idiot for leaving his notes lying around? Or is he the John the Baptist figure that is going to prefigure a structural change in British politics? That's the question on the agenda today.
Sam Coates, stick with us. Good to have you with us so far today. Let's also bring in Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Henry, what do you make of what's going on?
I mean, the thing that I'm trying to work out is how, in the digital age, do you leave any incriminating evidence lying around? It's one of the little things about this story which is just mind-boggling, right? Like 20 years ago, when everything was paper, fine. It's embarrassing, but it happens. It famously happens to governments. But now, you've got a resignation draft, which is an extremely sensitive document, and you have, one, printed it. You have, two, printed it in a building that you share with the Leader of the Opposition and her staff. And then three, you've lost track of it. Like, if that's actually what happened, it's just an absolutely mind-boggling chain of events from start to finish. It would be good, I think, if the party could publish this evidence. I think we're in a strange sort of limbo where Kemi Badenoch says that she has absolute dispositive proof that Robert Jenrick was going to do this, but we haven't seen it. But on the other hand, Robert Jenrick hasn't come out, protested his innocence, and demanded that she publish it. So some sort of smoking gun clearly does exist, but it would be very interesting to see it.
Considering how prolific he is on his use of social media, it's interesting that he's not commenting as yet. I'm just actually looking at your Conservative Home website and looking at some of the responses from people who are commenting on your article. And there seems to be a sense amongst grassroots Conservatives of relative acknowledgement of Kemi Badenoch's swift and decisive action here.
Yeah, absolutely. If this defection was real, then Kemi Badenoch has, one, got quite lucky in getting across the evidence, but having got the evidence, she has acted with celerity and definitely insulated the party from what could have been an extremely damaging defection. Now, the loss of Robert Jenrick is nonetheless a loss to the party, just objectively. He was one of the front rank members of the shadow cabinet. He was one of the few who had any ability, really, in a very unpromising media environment, to cut through and sort of put the Conservatives on the news agenda. But nonetheless, if he was planning to defect, this is very decisive action from Kemi Badenoch, and she's to be commended for it.
What happens next in her team? Because obviously she's got to try and find someone to fill that role with regards to Jenrick. What will she look to kind of do in the next few hours and days?
Well, it's an interesting challenge because it definitely strengthens her position internally. Robert Jenrick was the obvious contender for the throne. And she has actually been in the hugely unusual position of having that heir apparent sat in the shadow cabinet with her who had been a previous leadership contender. And so who does she put in the justice brief? Well, that's in a way going to say quite a lot about the state of her leadership, because one of the reasons Robert Jenrick was able to cut through in that brief is, one, it's quite high salience with the public, but two, he was prepared to go a little bit off the reservation and do things on his own initiative. And one of the big problems the Conservative Party has at the minute is because Kemi Badenoch is taking a very slow and steady approach to making policy, and there's this big review which still hasn't completed, most of the shadow cabinet don't have anything to say. They can criticise Labour, but without being able to say what they would do instead, that doesn't really land. It's not really interesting. And so, one, is she going to pick somebody who is, if you like, on the Jenrick wing when it comes to questions like the European Convention of Human Rights? That's probably fine, since she's come out in favour of leaving it herself. But is she going to be able to appoint somebody who has the aptitude and the willingness to go and punch this bruise for the Labour Party? And is she going to give them the licence to do it when the fact that Robert Jenrick was doing it is one of the reasons that he was viewed as a leadership challenger?
I'm just seeing a little bit of commentary. Robert Jenrick, obviously the Member of Parliament for Newark, the Conservative councillor for Newark West, Keith Girling, has spoken to the Press Association saying, I'm obviously very, very, very disappointed in Robert. I'm a great believer in loyalty, and he's shown a complete lack of loyalty there. I think Kemi has done absolutely the right thing when she finds evidence of what he's plotting to do. She's shown real leadership there to sack him, kick him out of the party, and we'll deal with the aftermath. Interesting reaction there from Keith Girling, Newark West Conservative councillor. And obviously that's the key date, isn't it? March the 7th, the local elections that are coming up. And, you know, that was the big moment. Many are expecting to see Reform surge ahead above the other parties. What does this do in terms of any strategising, planning and potential impact ahead of those elections?
I mean, any defection and dissension is bad for a party machine. I don't know how much this will in itself have an impact on the local election results. Voters vote in local elections for all kinds of local reasons as well as national reasons, and it is months and months and months away. And sometimes those of us who work in news can forget that other people with better balances of their interests, they often just get on with their lives and they don't necessarily remember all of this stuff. But the interesting thing in terms of Kemi Badenoch's future is that a lot of people inside the party had really thought that the local elections in May were when it was a real make or break point for her leadership, because it was a question of, OK, last year's local elections were an absolute disaster. The Conservatives lost something like 2/3 of all the seats they were defending. If that happened again, or anything like it happened again, it would probably be time to call time on Kemi Badenoch's leadership. But now the main challenger, the person who was obviously positioned to take over in the event of a panicky mutiny in May, is gone. And so actually, in a way, it might just take the pressure off Kemi, because even if they are catastrophic results, and whatever that means for the party in the long term, there is no longer, at the moment, that locus of opposition around which mutinous Tory MPs might have rallied.
Henry Hill from Conservative Home, good to have you with us. Appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
You're watching Sky News. Let's bring you up to speed on how we've got to this point for both the Conservatives and for Robert Jenrick. Well, Jenrick was first elected to Parliament in June 2014, winning a by-election for the seat of Newark in Nottinghamshire. Just over 5 years later, Jenrick was appointed to a cabinet position, serving as Housing Secretary until September 2021. October 2022, Robert Jenrick was then appointed Minister of State for Immigration under Rishi Sunak. In the December of the following year, he resigned from his position over, quote, strong disagreements with the government's response to problems with the Rwanda asylum plan. Following the Conservatives' election defeat in 2024, Mr Jenrick announced his leadership bid for the party. He remained the front-runner after the two ballots, securing the most votes by Conservative MPs. Jenrick, though, came second in the final round of MP voting in the Tory leadership election, therefore making it through to the membership vote, which would decide the winner. He lost that election, getting 43.5% of the vote compared to his opponent, Kemi Badenoch, who secured 56.5%. Following his defeat, Robert Jenrick was subsequently appointed Shadow Justice Secretary by his leadership rival. And just over a year after his appointment to the position, the Newark MP was sacked from the Shadow Cabinet, had the whip removed and his party membership suspended. Kemi Badenoch in the process saying there was clear, irrefutable evidence that he was plotting to, in secret, defect. Well, let's bring in our political editor, Sam Coates, who joins us now and has been with us throughout the course of the day. Sam, just talk to us about the character of Robert Jenrick, the man that he is, because lots of people will be aware of some of the social media videos that he made on the London Underground, for example, also at some of the car boot sales, kind of tackling people on potential stolen goods. He's not someone that's afraid of grasping the limelight, is he?
Absolutely not. It's pretty much the longest I've ever heard of Robert Jenrick not going before a camera. Robert Jenrick, we want to hear from you as soon as possible. Look, as the photos that you just showed on screen demonstrate extremely well, Gareth, Robert Jenrick is the master of political reinvention. Look, when he came into Parliament in 2014, he was a Tory One Nationer on the moderate wing of the Conservative Party. He ascended quickly through the ranks to become a Remainer in the 2016 referendum, only to then become a hard Brexiteer after that.
I'm just going to pump the brakes for a second. The Prime Minister's reacted. Let's take a listen.
Well, my question is, why did it take so long? Jenrick's been making toxic comments to try and divide our country for months and months and months. And it's only now, when he's on the verge of defecting to Reform, that Badenoch gets round to sacking him. So that's weakness on her part. There's a bigger story here, because we're seeing a flood of Tory politicians, ex-politicians, politicians going across to Reform because they know that the Tory party is a sinking ship. Equally, from Reform's point of view, you've got Nigel Farage, who is welcoming these failed politicians into his ranks and building his party as a party of the politicians, Tory politicians, who let the country down so badly. Meanwhile, this Labour government is taking on Grok, which is doing disgusting images of women and children, taking them on and not tolerating what they're doing, because we're driven by our values. We're not going to be put off by big institutions, big companies. And today we've had figures out showing that waiting lists are down in England again, and that the economy is turning a corner with better growth. So whilst we're delivering for the country, they're self-obsessed, looking only at themselves.
The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer there, Sam, saying, why did it take so long? Jenrick's been making toxic comments to try and divide the country for months and months and months. Is Sir Keir Starmer right?
Sir Keir Starmer is right to leap on this. Labour will be licking their lips, because after weeks of internal governing party turmoil, now attention is going to shift dramatically to the battle on the right of British politics between Reform UK and the Conservatives. I've just got to say, Gareth, a little bit of kudos to bits of the Labour Party machine. They actually picked up a little sniff of this in recent weeks. I was getting messages from some people who worked in Labour pointing out that key allies of Robert Jenrick were having meetings with Reform. They kind of knew something was up. None of the rest of us could stand it up. But there's been a little bit of this in the ether, aside from the very public signs and the very public statements that Robert Jenrick made that were quite often at odds with Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative Party leader. So we have this moment where the focus of politics will now shift. But it's bigger than that, this moment. This moment really is about Robert Jenrick, a prominent Conservative, asking where the future of the right of British politics is better, which party better serves the right of British politics. Was he, as the Conservative Party leader alleges, about to defect to Reform? Did he carelessly, sloppily leave his resignation speech notes lying around his defection address, presumably on the stage next to Nigel Farage, possibly prepared for as soon as the next few days? Did he leave that somewhere where Team Badenoch was able to get hold of it? And is him moving from the traditional, most successful political party in the Western world, the Conservative Party, to Nigel Farage's relatively insurgent new upstart party, Reform UK, does that mean that Reform UK have the upper hand? Both the Conservatives and Reform UK will argue over the meaning of today's event. But at the heart of it, we're still waiting to hear from you, Robert Jenrick. Please do get in touch. Please do come in front of the closest camera to you. You're not normally this camera shy. We are waiting to find out what you will do, because What Robert Jenrick does next will determine the story of the British right, the story of the Conservative Party and reform. But a really smart point made by your interviewee, Henry Hill. One of the big consequences of today has been that Robert Jenrick's departure from the Conservative Party will make it harder to unseat Kemi Badenoch because there's no big rival in the wings.
Sam Coates there, and Robert Jenrick, you'll find Sam Coates at 4 Millbank if you need to go and find him. You know where the studio is. Just a little bit of reaction from the MP for Harrow East, Bob Blackman, saying online, sad to lose Rob Jenrick, demonstrates strong and decisive leadership from Kemi, complete contrast to the weakness of the PM and his constant U-turns. Well, let's hear from another Conservative, former Conservative Minister, Conservative peer, Lord Ed Vaizey. My Lord, good to have you with us. What's going on in your party?
Well, what's going on is that Robert Jenrick has defected. I mean, I absolutely agree with what lies behind your question, which is, do the Conservative Party want to see this defection? Of course not. It'd be much better if Robert Jenrick had stayed in the shadow cabinet as a serving Conservative. As Sam was saying earlier, he's an able politician, and he certainly gets, to a certain extent, the new way of doing politics, as his many viral social media posts show. But I do think, point number one, no, the Conservative doesn't need this. Conservatives don't need this. They don't need it like a hole in the head. But point number two, I would say, is that over the last few months, Kemi Badenoch, I think, has been really impressive in getting into her stride as a leader. And I'm not just saying that as a sort of mantra of a politician coming on your show and mouthing. It's what I genuinely believe. I was a Kemi Badenoch agnostic. I'm now a believer. This has made me believe in her more. I think she's handled what is a deeply unhelpful day as well as she can, and showed really quite impressive leadership over it. Now, I don't know whether I'm talking from the Westminster Village and the public out there are just saying it's still a shower at the Conservative Party. This is just another example of why they're unelectable, or whether they will be as impressed as I am at the way Kemi Badenoch has handled this. And the final point I would say, which is a theme that's developing with reform, is that if they're going to keep hiring ex-Conservatives from the last Conservative government that was thrown out by the electorate, I don't think that's going to be a very compelling offer to the voters at the next general election. Basically saying you can have the last Conservative government, but without Boris Johnson.
I just want to pick up on your point of saying that it was better to have Robert Jenrick remain in the shadow cabinet, remain in the Conservative Party than not. So Keir Starmer saying, why did it take so long for Kemi Badenoch to sack Robert Jenrick? And was there a potential challenge to your party that the fact that there was Kemi Badenoch as leader and then heir apparent sat alongside her, Robert Jenrick, and that constant narrative, that constant questioning about whether he would try and take over the leadership of the party, whether he would move to reform, whether he would look to try and at some point unite reform in the Conservative Party? You know, you say better to be in than out, but has that actually always been the case, do you think?
It hasn't always been the case, and it was definitely the case in the early days of Kemi Badenoch's leadership of the Conservative Party, that Robert Jenrick was clearly running, as it were, a shadow leadership campaign because he regarded her as weak, and the Conservative Party are quite used to getting rid of their leaders, and now that disease has spread to the Labour Party. The only people it hasn't affected are the Lib Dems because they're too boring to have a leadership election. But I felt that things had settled down, that Kemi, as I say, had really kind of found her feet as leader of the Conservative Party. And obviously, any Conservative would want big figures like Robert Jenrick to stay in the party and play their part in getting us back on the pitch and getting us to a position where we could be elected as the next government. So, no, I don't want Robert Jenrick to defect. But given that he has decided to leave, and make no bones about it, Kemi Badenoch did not throw Robert Jenrick out. Technically, she has, but she didn't really. He walked away from the Conservative Party, and I'm very sad about that. I think he's walked away from a party that is beginning to find its feet again, beginning to get permission to talk to the voters again. And I think he's going to a party that is now full of ex-Conservatives who are part of the last government, who aren't particularly compelling figures, who all have their own, I think, quite selfish reasons for joining reform. And I don't think that's going to be a winning formula for reform. That may be wishful thinking on my part, but that is what I am beginning to believe.
obviously worth noting that as yet, Robert Jenrick hasn't made any comment himself, hasn't actually formally announced any defection to reform. Nigel Farage saying that he's been having conversations with him, acknowledging that that was ongoing, but also saying that he wasn't signed up yet. He says he's going to pick up the phone and speak to him later and might even buy him a pint. So we're in this interesting middle ground, this purgatory at the moment, where we have part of the story, but not the full story. What else could come out of this? Could we see potentially, if Robert Jenrick does go to reform, that members of his team, some of his closest supporters go, well, heavens, if Rob's going, we're going too?
I think that's a fair comment to make. Who knows who Robert's kind of close confidants are in the House of Commons? People like Sam Coates, your excellent political editor, will know much better than I who are the kind of foot soldiers with Robert Jenrick who would have been behind him running for the leadership, who might now say, well, we're going as well. And I completely accept that if that is the case, if this has a wider ripple effect, it will continue to seriously damage the Conservative Party, will set us back before we can get back on our feet. But having said all that, I think if Kemi Badenoch was given incontrovertible evidence, and it was apparently a resignation speech left on the photocopier, she couldn't really do anything but act. She couldn't do anything but get ahead of it. Absolutely. The thing that really struck me when I read Kemi Badenoch's statement was that Robert Jenrick had proposed to resign in the most damaging way possible. And that really, you can accept people resigning on principle, but the Tory party has given Robert Jenrick everything he has at the moment in terms of his political career and the satisfaction of having served in government and trying to make a difference. I think when you leave your friends and turn your back on them, you should do it with some grace and humility. And if he was planning to do it in a way that was going to be as painful as possible for his former colleagues, that really does stick in the throat.
Yeah, and I just want to pick up on that. You were a member of Parliament from 2005. You chuckled a little bit when you referenced the fact that there's allegedly this paperwork, this printout of this potential resignation speech. Considering your experience in politics and in Westminster, have we ever heard of anything quite like this?
I'm sure there will be legions of examples that will come out of people inadvertently. It's normally highly sensitive secret government documents left on tube trains or buses, but I'm sure there have been other examples of people inadvertently giving the game away. I don't think we've ever seen a catastrophic resignation since Michael Gove resigned from Boris's leadership team and set off the leadership election that I think damaged the Conservative Party very badly at the time. But I haven't seen an inadvertent resignation. I mean, I'm used to defections. When I was a Tory candidate for Wantage, my sitting Tory MP defected. And I came out of the cinema having watched a film and said, "You've got 17 missed calls." I knew something was up.
17 is at least 15 too many, isn't it, in that respect? I just want to pick up a little bit on some of the comments the Prime Minister was making, because, yesterday, politicians, parliamentarians, members of the press were talking about another U-turn, the 13th for the Labour Party since coming to power in July 2024. We were talking about digital IDs. We were talking about the strategy and direction of the governing party. This surely will be manna from heaven for the Labour Party.
Absolutely. And that's what's so awful about it in many respects, because, as I say, again, I keep saying this, I may be talking from the Westminster Village here. There may be lots of your viewers watching this who are normal voters who think, what is this guy on? But it feels to me, I wish this government well when it won the election in July 2004. We needed a fresh new government. It hasn't been able to use its majority. It seems incapable of putting forward a policy, sticking to it and seeing it through. So to be cynical for a moment, or realistic, the opportunities for the Conservative Party have come back much more quickly than they might otherwise have done, given the catastrophic defeat we had in July 2024. Plus, I felt, as I say, that Kemi Badenoch has really kind of found her feet as a Conservative leader. I agree that she, turned some people off, but she's very straight talking, and I think that is what the majority of the public quite like these days. So there was a great opportunity for the Conservatives. And thirdly, I do feel that kind of reform had slightly peaked, that there were a lot of, frankly, not particularly impressive members of the Conservative Party who were defecting to reform for reasons that the public could draw their own conclusions. So it is very unhelpful, to put it mildly, that Robert Jenrick has left the Conservative Party just at a point when Kemi Badenoch was, broadly speaking, winning every PMQ's encounter and really starting to cut through with the public. But we'll pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off. And as I say, given what he was doing or planning to do, I think Kemi Badenoch has handled it in the best way possible and very effectively. And I think there will be a lot of people who will be, me included, who will be impressed by the way she's handled it and will be even more convinced that she is the right person to be leading the Conservative Party.
Ed Vaizey, Lord Ed Vaizey, good to have you with us. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Just a reminder, we're bringing together all of the developments of the last hour or so and all of the background to it as well on the Politics Hub live blog. It's on your Sky News app. It's on the Sky News website as well. So you get all of the details there. The digital team there typing away furiously to bring you all of the key moments as they happen. But let's remind you here on Sky News of the breaking news this lunchtime. Robert Jenrick sacked from the shadow cabinet by Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, saying she has irrefutable evidence that he was plotting in secret to defect in a way designed to be as damaging as possible to the party. This is what she posted on X.
This morning, I removed the Conservative whip from Robert Jenrick after dismissing him from the shadow cabinet. I was very sorry to be presented with clear, irrefutable evidence, not just that he was preparing to defect, but he was planning to do so in the most damaging way possible to the Conservative Party and his shadow cabinet colleagues. It is my responsibility to protect our party, and faced with that information, I took the only decision that any responsible leader could. Because the British public are tired of political psychodrama. So am I. They saw too much of it in the last government, they're seeing too much of it in this government. I will not repeat those mistakes. When I was elected leader, I committed to doing politics differently. Disloyalty and dishonesty undermine trust in politics. They're also disrespectful to our party members, our councillors, MPs, and most of all, voters. You all deserve better. Conservatives suffered a heavy defeat in 2024. That was painful, but we are rebuilding, with strong principles, clear plans, and with a serious team united around a shared purpose. When individuals choose to walk away from that effort for personal ambition, that tells you nothing about the Conservative Party and everything you need to know about them. There will be more to say, and I know a lot of commentary about this decision. But I want you all to be in no doubt. It's a time of global uncertainty. I am focused on holding the government to account, ensuring they are acting in the national interest, and that Conservatives deliver a proper plan for a stronger economy, stronger borders, and a stronger Britain.
Well, that was Kemi Badenoch. We've also been hearing from the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. This is his reaction.
My question is, why did it take so long? Jenrick's been making toxic comments to try and divide our country for months and months and months. And it's only now, when he's on the verge of defecting to reform, that Badenoch gets round to sacking him. So that's weakness on her part. There's a bigger story here, because we're seeing a flood of Tory politicians, ex-politicians, politicians going across to reform because they know that the Tory party is a sinking ship. Equally, from Reform's point of view, you've got Nigel Farage, who is welcoming these failed politicians into his ranks and building his party as a party of the politicians, Tory politicians, who let the country down so badly. Meanwhile, this Labour government is taking on Grok, which is doing disgusting images of women and children, taking them on and not tolerating what they're doing, because we're driven by our values. We're not going to be put off by big institutions, big companies. And today we've had figures out showing that waiting lists are down in England again, and that the economy is turning a corner with better growth. So whilst we're delivering for the country, they're self-obsessed, looking only at themselves.
Just hearing from my colleagues in our Westminster office that sources tell them that Robert Jenrick has also now been booted out of the Conservative WhatsApp groups as well. So not only out of the party and out of shadow cabinet, but out of the phone book too. Well, how do we get to this point for the Conservatives and for Robert Jenrick? Let's take a look at history as it was. Robert Jenrick first elected into Parliament in June 2014, winning a by-election for the seat of Newark in Nottinghamshire. Just over 5 years later, Mr Jenrick was appointed to a cabinet position, serving as Housing Secretary until September 2021. In October 2022, Jenrick was appointed Minister of State for Immigration under Rishi Sunak. In December of the following year, he resigned from his position over strong disagreements with the government's response to problems with the Rwanda asylum plan. Following the Conservatives' election defeat in 2024, Mr Jenrick announced his leadership bid for the party. He remained the frontrunner after 2 ballots, securing the most votes by Conservative MPs. Came second in the final round of MP voting in the Tory leadership election, but made it through to the membership vote, which would decide the winner. He lost that, though, getting 43.5% of the vote compared to Kemi Badenoch's 56.5%. Following his defeat, Robert Jenrick subsequently appointed Shadow Justice Secretary by his leadership rival. And now, just over a year after that appointment to the position, the Newark MP, sacked from the Shadow Cabinet, had the whip removed and his party membership suspended. Kemi Badenoch said this was due to, quote, clear, irrefutable evidence that he was plotting in secret to defect. And, as I just said, also out of WhatsApp too. Well, joining us now is former Conservative Special Advisor James Starky. James, good to have you with us. Good to you to share your time. What would you give as your next piece of advice to Robert Jenrick now?
I mean, to Robert Jenrick, at the moment, the problem is there's a kind of total vacuum of news from his point of view. So we've heard Kemi's side of the story, which is that she has evidence he was going to defect. Heard Nigel Farage earlier, almost, but not totally confirming that, saying he has had conversations with Robert Jenrick. We haven't heard anything from Robert Jenrick. So at the very least, I mean, you would think if it wasn't true, he'd have come out pretty quickly to dispute it.
And then what would your advice be to Kemi Badenoch to try and continue to own this situation? Because she has seemingly stolen a march on potentially Jenrick and potentially Nigel Farage as well.
I think she absolutely has. I mean, if you cast your mind back to when, it's a good few years ago now, but Keir Starmer booted Jeremy Corbyn out of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer got a lot of credit for that, made him look like a much stronger leader than maybe he had looked at before, but seen as very decisive. And I think today Kemi's team will be hoping to go for something of the same. I mean, in terms of the knowledge, you know, if it's true, they knew that Jenrick was going to do this. They had little choice than to take strong action, but to come out so forcefully as she has and make the video and kind of boot him out straight away, I think she'll get credit in the bank with that. And that's after having a good few months. So I think you can see her numbers on leadership. There was a poll out on Monday, I think, which showed her versus both Farage and Starmer improving by about 8 or 10 points.
And more broadly, a YouGov Sky News poll showing that Reform on about 24 points, Conservatives on 20, that gap appearing to narrow, according to our polling. How important is the wider Shadow Cabinet at this moment? This isn't just about two individuals. This is about the leadership of the party more broadly. What can the Shadow Cabinet do to try and support Kemi Badenoch and to try and really now bring about a sense of collective responsibility, of collegiality, and of a sense of a well-run parliamentary group?
Well, I think I was around Parliament on the morning that Christian Wakeford, Conservative MP at the time, defected to Labour. And you can see in these times, and I can see it on kind of WhatsApp groups today, these kind of defections, or alleged defections in this case, do tend to bring people together and create a feeling of unity. So I think she'll have that. I think Kemi will have that feeling of unity within Tory ranks. But there is a space because, you know, Rob was good on social media, had been a good campaigner. I think, you know, maybe there was talk that he kind of ran a shadow leadership thing. Maybe he did or maybe he didn't. But I think broadly it was for a positive benefit for the party and for Kemi that he's very strong on social media, strong on issues, got some U-turns out of the government. I think there's a space for that. I think there's people like Nick Timothy, who's been very vocal on the Westminster issue recently. I would imagine he would be favourite for this role. He used to be, like me, a special advisor at the Home Office and has been a prominent MP pretty quickly from coming in. So I think getting people in Shadow Cabinet, yes, on the loyalty side, but also to take some of the space that Rob has, which is to be out there communicating, because that's where we have hovered around a similar polling point for a while. So we need to translate kind of Kemi's performance across the party and move that into our polling numbers.
I just want to bring in a comment by Tobias Ellwood, former Conservative Defence Minister, former Conservative MP as well, who's posted direct to Sky saying, after big election defeats, it takes time in opposition to confirm your fresh message and why where you sit in the political spectrum in order to appeal beyond your base. This is made easier when those seeking further drift to the right choose to defect. So Tobias Ellwood there making the point about the very kind of heart of politics of the Conservative Party and what they'll be able to present not only at the general election but also kind of at the local elections too. What will the messaging be now on terms of party and policy from the Conservatives going forwards?
Well, I don't agree with that. I think, we need to be a broad church. I don't kind of look at Rob's defection with any joy. I think that, we should be a party that we should be able to have both Tobias Ellwood and Rob Jenrick in that. That's how you get election-winning coalitions, is being able to appeal beyond what is your base, for example. So I think, certainly they'll, look at the membership vote that Rob got. He didn't win, but he got, 46 or 44, I think it was, % of the membership vote. He got a strong chunk of the membership vote, strong chunk of the MPs. So he definitely had wide support in the party. It wasn't kind of like out there on his own. So I don't personally look at Rob going with joy. I think Kemi's handled it really, really well. I think we need to, Tories do need to band together, but I don't think it's a case of rejecting, one side of the party or another, personally.
People like you and I can talk about politics all day long, and we can talk about the names, the faces within party politics. And then I'm always struck whenever we see polling of recognition of parliamentarians amongst the electorate. It's generally very, very low. And I wonder to what degree we need to think beyond the Westminster Village, as Lord Vaizey was saying, and think about the public at large. To what degree will they be moved, do you think, by Kemi's actions, if at all? And to what degree do you think they'll be moved by potentially Robert Jenrick joining Reform, if at all?
It's a really good point. So I think I spent kind of nearly 10 years working for YouGov Gas, and I've seen this before. The public know the PM, the Chancellor, maybe the Leader of the Opposition, and that's normally about it. But I do think on either side, narratives matter in politics, and I'm sure many talking heads. I mean, I can't imagine the amount of times today you've used the term former Conservative X or Y. But as many talking heads will talk about the importance of narrative, and it is. I think Starmer lacks one. I think you can hear Farage wants a narrative which says it's the end of the Tory party, because while the Conservative Party are there, he can't get a majority. The Conservative Party obviously don't want that. They want to have a narrative they can get back into government. So there's two sides to look at this. There's a narrative that there are Conservatives going to Reform, and that is how Reform will want to portray it. But I think Lord Vaizey touched on this. There's also Reform's big selling point is we're not the establishment. We're different. We're insurgents. Well, I think if you're taking two people who were Conservative cabinet ministers not less than 3 years ago, it's pretty hard to sell that. These were two prominent members of the Conservative government. So I think there's a kind of conflict there on the narrative, if you like, of the Reform side. Equally, the Tories need to show they've changed, and there might be a kind of chink of light, which is having some people from the last government defect and leave might not be a totally bad thing.
And just picking up on that polling for a second, it is a very close race in real terms amongst all the parties. We've never really seen such bundled polling. You've got Lib Dems on 15, you've kind of got the Greens on 16, you've got Labour on 20 and 19. It's a very narrow field, and 1 or 2 points either way can make a big difference. And thus, this is a good opportunity for the Labour Party to try and make some headway after some pretty difficult months, and certainly a difficult day yesterday when we're talking about, from the press's perspective, another U-turn on digital ID cards, for example. How do the opposition parties to Reform and the Conservatives, i.e. the Lib Dems, the Greens and Labour, how do they respond? How will they try and make mileage out of this?
Well, I think you could see on the clip you had of the Prime Minister that he was quite happy to be on this turf. He wanted to say, well, look, Tories are falling apart. There's a guy leaving, and Nigel Farage is taking all the ex-Tories. And by the way, look how tough I am. I stood up to Elon Musk. But that's on the back. He's kind of. I think if you're relying on other events, as apart from the Musk issue, as the PM is doing, as Prime Minister, you're not in a good place. That's on the back of 12, 13 U-turns, whatever the latest count is. And to your point, Gareth, we're definitely in a very interesting world now, which we've never really been in. The closest we came to is the coalition, which we're in a multi-party world, where Starmer is, of course, looking to the votes he lost to Reform at the last election, but has been losing since the last election. Hence, they are in, they won a huge majority at the last election, and Labour are now polling below the Conservatives. So he says the Conservatives are doing bad. His party is polling below us. And he's now also having to look to his left flank with the rise of Zach Polanski, and the Lib Dems are still there as well. So we're in interesting times in that there's kind of, if the government's in the middle, they're kind of being eaten from both sides.
Former Conservative Special Advisor James Starky, really good to have you with us. I appreciate you sharing your time here on Sky News.
Thank you.
Let's bring in our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, now. And Sam, we were talking a little bit earlier about the fact that even the WhatsApp chats are now devoid of Robert Jenrick for the Conservative Party. I should imagine, though, your phone is going ballistic. What are people telling you? What tidbits are you finding out? What more do we know?
One very senior Labour advisor has just messaged to say, great move from Kemi. So some appreciation for the handling of this situation in the Labour Party by Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative Party leader. Look, moments like this matter, as James was just saying, because they shape narratives, they shape the story that people are trying to tell. And I think Kemi Badenoch could spy a world in which one of her top team, possibly the most significant member of her shadow cabinet, and certainly the person that Conservative Party members, when we last polled, wanted to replace Kemi Badenoch, was going to walk off stage and defect to Reform UK. So she jumped ahead of the story and has sacked him from the shadow cabinet, suspended him from the Conservative Parliamentary Party, and he is out of front-rank Tory politics. The question, I think, this lunchtime is that narrative completely true? Does the evidence that she claims to have, which she says is clear and irrefutable, that he was likely to leave in the next few days, the resignation speech that we've been briefed about, almost done, is that all true? Or, as some suggest, could Robert Jenrick have been keeping his options a little bit more open? And Kemi Badenoch has effectively, successfully kicked out a massive rival, possible pretender to the crown. Either way, it looks like it shored her up, making clear where her red lines are, making clear what she expects, and also sending a signal about how she views enhanced cooperation with Reform UK, something she has always been more cautious about than Robert Jenrick. And listen to Robert Jenrick. Look, I caught up with Robert Jenrick at the Conservative Party conference and questioned him about maybe doing a deal later on in this Parliament to fight Labour. Just have a listen to how he responded to questions like that. Do you think in the next general election, the Tories and Reform UK should be fighting it out for every vote? Or is there some kind of agreement that they can come to?
Look, Kemi has been very clear, as in fact has Nigel Farage, that we're not in the business of pacts and deals.
But what about you?
I don't think there's going to be a deal, and I don't think that's the right approach.
Do you think you don't think it's...
No. What we've got to do as a party is change. We've got to learn the lessons of the past. We let people down when we were in office. We've got to learn the lessons, change the party, and win those people back. I want the Tory party to be once again the natural home for all the small C Conservatives out there in the country.
You would never support a pact of any sort.
Look, that is not our priority. That's not our priority. What I want to do now is just focus on changing the Tory party, changing so that we can win back the support that we lost at the general election.
That was Robert Jenrick saying a pact with Reform, then he was a Conservative frontbencher, of course, was not a priority. That's not the language of ruling it out, promising never to do it, the kind of things that you would expect to hear from Kemi Badenoch. So clear ideological blue or maybe purple water between the leader and her then Shadow Justice Secretary. But this lunchtime, Robert Jenrick out, possibly heading to Reform UK, maybe as early as today. Nigel Farage using a press conference in Scotland in the last couple of hours to say he's going to phone Robert Jenrick today, maybe buy him a pint. Let's see what happens. It appears as if there's some doubt that Robert Jenrick endorses the idea that he was immediately about to defect in the current next week or two. So it's going to be a process of working out and establishing the facts. So far, the Conservatives haven't released any of this so-called clear and irrefutable evidence that the Tory party leader based her decision on. So I think you've got a sense of evolving drama. This is a story about an individual, the individual you can see on your screen, Robert Jenrick. And did he make an epic boo-boo, leave some speech notes lying around out of the Conservative Party and now has to determine her future? Or is it about something bigger? Is it about a structural change in British politics with two parties battling it out for what the right of British politics really looks like? And Robert Jenrick is almost not an idiot who left his notes lying around, but as a John the Baptist figure who could smell the direction of British politics into the next decade, 2 decades, with Reform UK supplanting the Tories as the principal force on the right of British politics. Is this story a harbinger of that? We don't yet know, but it matters. It matters to those on the right of British politics, but it matters to everybody in politics, and hence it matters to all voters and viewers as well. Because in this febrile, uncertain environment where we seem to be in an era of 5-party politics, the struggle on the right clearly has some way to go, and that will determine the picture and the story going into the next election. And what today has really reminded us, Gareth, what today's really reminded us is none of that is set. None of that is determined. So people who say it's an inevitability that Nigel Farage wins a landslide at the next election, given the polling right now, that's not true. There are no certainties. Is it clear, as the poll lead of Reform UK over the Tories seems to narrow, that the Tories will definitely be in second place? That's not clear. Could it be, as Nigel Farage alleges at his press conference, that whatever the polls, whatever the noise, that the local elections and the Scottish and Welsh elections will determine the future of British politics? That's not clear yet. What we do know is an allegation that the man on your screen, Robert Jenrick, left copy of his defection speech lying around. It got sent to Kemi Badenoch. We know that and conversations with Nigel Farage that have been confirmed form the basis of her decision to strip him of his position in the shadow cabinet, strip him of his membership of the Conservative Parliamentary Party, and sling him out of front-rank Tory politics. Barely 16 months ago was the leadership contest, the result of which you can see on your screens right now. Kemi Badenoch at that point was the winner. You can see Robert Jenrick sitting next to his wife. Kemi Badenoch won, but Robert Jenrick never gave up. The story of 2025 for the Tories was that Kemi Badenoch continually being challenged by Robert Jenrick. But now he is out. And one thing is for certain, it will no longer be possible for Robert Jenrick to challenge Kemi Badenoch after the May elections if they go badly for the Conservatives. Whatever else, Kemi Badenoch has made her position as Conservative Party leader more secure, because the one person that could take over from her comprehensively, would be wanted by the members, is now out of the Conservative Party front rank and probably out of the Conservative Party altogether, to head, maybe within hours or days, to Reform UK and into Nigel Farage's embrace.
Just one very final thought, Sam, and we've only got 45 seconds for it. Is there any chance that Robert Jenrick doesn't go to Reform and ends up sitting as an independent MP?
He could be an independent MP, sitting, ironically, pretty close to the Reform UK MPs. But Robert Jenrick, we don't know what he's going to do, but he's a very, very ambitious man. So what are your options at this moment? Well, hitch yourself to the top party in British politics, or sit there in obscurity as an independent. It doesn't take, I think we can see which way the wind is blowing.
We will follow that wind as it blows and follow the developments throughout the day here on Sky News. Sam Coates, good to have you with us. Sam and the politics team will be with us throughout the course of the day. There's plenty more, as I say, as ever, on the Politics Hub live blog. But this is the breaking news today. The news that Kemi Badenoch has sacked Robert Jenrick from the shadow cabinet